This is what 165 kilowatts and 550 Newton meters looks like. So to be honest, I was surprised that I didn't feel that extra 50 Newton meters. And I'm not sure if it's because the gearing concealed it. I feel that with a lower diff gear like the 79, I would have felt that extra 50 Newton meters at takeoff. Today's little drive, we're going to be taking Toyota GR Sport Hilux for a drive. I'm going to talk you through the little differences between the two, both having the 2.8 1GD. So first thing I notice, like I notice it when I jump in Shell's GR 300, is the brakes. They stop. It can't be the same booster, it can't be the same vacuum pump, or can it? So to the eye, the booster and the master cylinder are both different between the two. Now Hiluxes have only been drum rear brakes forever. It's only since the Rogue and now the GR Sport that they are a disc brake rear end. For decades, we've been converting the back of drum brake Hiluxes to discs in our comp cars. Now, I'm not sure if it's the exact same disc as a 79, but at 312mm in diameter, it's the same size, while the front's boasting 338mm diameter discs. I mean, the 79 fronts are only 322. No wonder the thing stops better. So you wouldn't want to think that that's Toyota just being lazy because they've got a factory full of 16-inch wheels, and that the Hilux comes out with 17s, so will fit over the bigger disc. The factory rock sliders on the Hilux look awesome. Now I think they're going to be a little bit more of a sidestep over a rock slider, being only 2mm thick. Not as heavy as the 79, and as you can see, I've already bent the aluminium steps on this. So the Hilux's seat is definitely more comfortable than the Cruiser. A heated front seat, and it's a pretty cool feature come winter, so we've learned with the 300. You know what, power feels pretty much the same when you put your foot down as far as on the road. So this is just in eco mode. Just as responsive as you would imagine. You get a lot more lock out of the steering. Good pickup. So we're going to put it in power. I feel it's about the same as when you put the tow haul mode on the 79 of mine. When you do put your foot down in the modern day vehicle, the traction control does want to stop any extra power getting fed to the tyres. Then I want to see what it feels like in low range. So you don't have your L stick, your old school L stick on this. There's your actuator. You can generally feel the crawl ratio when you do put it in low range. So to me, that crawls quite well. It feels quite low geared. Nowadays, transmissions are even tuned. Now while the two use the same gearbox, an AC 60F, both 6-speed, same ratios throughout the range, yet different part numbers, not exactly the same boxes. Transfer cases, both of them having a low range ratio of 2.488 to 1, are different part numbers, and looking at them, fundamentally different. Brakes are just amazing on this thing. The width increase on the GR Sport is 135mm in the front and 155 in the rear. So with those figures, there is a discrepancy. Yes, the rear is wider by 50mm. So is this a complete new housing from Toyota? Having the shock there on the outer side of the spring, I guess they did need to make it a little bit wider. Must say too, that head unit reminds me of the 300s one, just maybe a touch smaller. You don't get that in a 70. This is still a baby at just under 10,000 Ks too. You're looking at on-road costs from $74,000. So I guess you're what, $10,000, $15,000 cheaper than a 79. And then you got to go and put a tray on the 79. Don't tell me they're factory speakers. I actually feel like it idles lower. It kind of sort of like it's not that far off stalling. That's what it feels like. The aircon's not on. It doesn't matter what mode I go in. The instrument cluster for the kilometers and your average fuel usage doesn't seem to be as easy to find. He obviously doesn't have it showing, but That's 12.7 litres per 100. I never see numbers that low in mine. So these Hiluxes come out with a 3:9 diff ratio. A very high ratio. Big difference to the 79, which is a 4.3. Now where we're gonna feel that kind of discrepancy is potentially top end, towing, off-roading definitely, being able to run a bigger tyre, 100%. So what we used to do back in the day, back before transfer gears were so readily available in the Hiluxes that were coming out with 4.3s, you put a bigger tyre on, you went to a 4.8. That gave you the power to push the bigger tyre on the road, but in the bush, it brought your gearing back to pretty much what was standard. Otherwise, in low range, the car would run away on you. And what I mean by that, you'd run out of puff, going uphill, too high geared, and then coming down stuff, you'd be on the brakes all the time. Let's pop the bonnet. So when you open this bonnet, it looks so similar to Shell's Fortuner she had, which was 2018 model. So the cover on that all looks the same. We've got different hose clamps. But remember back then I was having problems with this intercooler hose. I mean, it's still here. We've still got the old version of filter systems. We also know that this has less oil capacity than the 79 series. I mean, that there could be that there's just no room for a bigger sump. I mean, to the naked eye, this is a totally different motor. Intercooler hoses are different, air filter's different, fuel filter's different. There's just no similarity at all to the naked eye. And you'd think by now that they'd have an exhaust system for the 79s. It seems as though the Hilux, the dump pipe drops on the driver's side there, and then it's a straight run. So at least that's a conventional join, a weld-on flange with bolts, as opposed to what we'll show you on the 79 in a second. The 70s, it's a little bit more complex. I'd really like to get this thing sounding a little bit deeper, throatier, maybe potentially getting that turbo whistle out a little bit more. And we're looking to work with the company to do a 3-inch exhaust. I actually love the concept of that. You've got your leaf springs, and then you've got a shock absorber on the outside of it. All the old models, they were all inside. Although, put a big shoe on, get these things flexing good, you're not too far off, are you? Check out that shackle. Shouldn't that be there to give it that little bit of height? Flex and comfort, that's strange. They still come with a factory rear diff lock. No rear sway bar on the Hilux, so I can imagine that this would flex quite nicely with the flat spring that it has. We know the N80s flex. We've got them on Bullet Truck at the moment. We ended up moving that front mount further forward to get the long leaves in. So this is actually out of an N80. This is a 2-inch lifted N80 rear. So it's exactly what's in the GR Sport Hilux. I do feel though that the shock would be way too short. In my opinion, it needs to be quite a bit longer to bridge the gap between the extension and compression. At the moment, it doesn't look like it would get that much down travel due to the length of the shock. The DPFs look somewhat the same. Where it drops into the first bend. Oil filter's in a different spot, but that could also just be a room thing. So that's a top mount intercooler. And that's a front mount intercooler. And I don't think that front mount intercooler has changed much because that's the hose we used to have dramas with in Shell's car. But we're no stranger to the 2.8 in the auto version. I used to love towing Bullet Truck with Shell's Fortuner. The only thing that I didn't like is it always felt like I wasn't heavy enough, that the bullet on the trailer would bully me around. The new ones in the 70s, they're water to air intercooled. I'll let you wash this under here. So what's the difference, you ask? Why change? For the current 79 bonnet, no bonnet scoop, but it's got a top mount intercooler. Now with the top mount, you've got a lot more space to breathe air in. So the more air you get, this allows the cylinders to fire with less lag. I guess it's out of harm's way when it comes to mud. So with the front mount, there in front of the radiator, it's a long way away from the engine base heat. Therefore, you get less heat soak. So then you have your rock crawling side of things where you're traveling at low speed. And I feel there that potentially the front mount might suit that kind of example. Now look, I only spent a little bit of time driving the Hilux, but I really did feel that the 79's 2.8 was much more superior, and that's not being biased much. So there's two different types of top mounts. There's air to air and air to water. So the new 79 is air to water. That's a lot more efficient in keeping things cool. Air to water uses water to pull heat away from the intake charge, while air to air uses air to cool it off. I was actually considering one of these UHF aerial brackets for the 300. You've also got to remember that it moves when the bonnet comes up. So GME make that. That's pretty cool, I like that. You've got to make sure that you don't get too big an aerial. That would smash the glass with that kind of leverage. The other thing I like with the Hilux is there's space here, usable space. You could put a second battery potentially, or a big compressor. I feel that the 80 litre tank is a little bit underdone to be set up as a decent tourer to do the outback without jerry cans. 3,500 kilo towing capacity, again same as the 79, with 780 kilo payload. I'm not sure that that's going to be enough from factory to tow your 3.5 ton, put passengers in and load up the tub. Start accessorizing, down comes your payload. So while both of them have a 2.8, there are differences between them. I love my Hiluxes. I'd much rather the 79. While I'm a solid axle front type of guy, they're long, they're heavy, they flex like burnt toast. I would take that over comfort any day of the week. Your twin lock from factory, you've got a solid axle, stronger front end, even though everybody's seen over the last couple of videos how weak the hubs were. But as far as pulling bullet truck on the trailer, 3 ton, I'd rather have no other vehicle, except of course for Shell's 300. But even with Shell's 300, you can't just go and throw the ramps in the back of a boot, especially if you've got an 80 litre angle taking up all the luggage room. I love driving this way more than I did that GR Hilux, I have to say. It's as aerodynamic as a brick, but I love the seating position and I love looking over that bonnet. The old school dash, that's me. Steering wise, some compare it to a tractor. So it's not as refined as what the Hilux was or what the 300 is. So I'm going to end the episode with a couple of little things that I noticed that I didn't really like. So we got a spacer there on the front coil to give that a little bit more height. I didn't like the shock lengths like I spoke of earlier. And then while I was underneath looking at the transfer case, there is a safety bracket here if your tail shaft does come astray. And it's like they got the one from the last model, it didn't work, so they welded another little bit of a bracket. So you've got like a W type bracket. I thank Nick from CarTech Tyre and Auto in Roselands for lending us the car for the day. It was fun driving it. I hope you enjoyed this one, and as always, thanks for watching.